Do not be deceived by that time-worn hat. It conceals a remarkably sharp business acumen. A young black boy named Bernard, who earns his living as a shoe shiner, strategically positions his stand in front of the bank, ensuring that his clientele is comprised solely of wealthy white patrons. The meager earnings from polishing shoes hold little significance for him. He operates with a deliberate pace, keen to overhear the financial discussions of the awaiting white individuals. After their departure, he meticulously records their words into a notebook. The sole object of his interest is the valuable monetary insights he gathers through these exchanges. Since his early years, his overriding aspiration has been to become a banker. It's 1939 in Texas, a setting where black people face severe discrimination. His father sadly recognizes the impossibility of his aspiration, yet determination flickers in Bernard's eyes. Defying all expectations, 15 years later, he and his wife, Eunice, alongside their children, moved to Los Angeles. With racial prejudices less pronounced than in his hometown, he opts to begin his entrepreneurial journey there. The family of three is squeezed into a dilapidated utility room at a relative's property. Nonetheless, Bernard guarantees his spouse that they will soon relocate. He embarks on his career as a real estate agent, actively seeking out properties across the city. Through keen observation, he discovers that the black community in Los Angeles is overpopulated, while the white demographic possesses numerous unoccupied houses. Black individuals are in need of rental options and possess the financial resources, yet opportunities remain lacking. This circumstance presents an excellent possibility for property investment and rentals. He notices a white-owned apartment building with weeds growing near the doorway, obviously neglected. Yet, only he acknowledges the potential in its location, adjoining the black zone. He addresses the owner, stating, "You're only renting out a fraction of this apartment building. Why not consider selling it to me? I'll give you $30,000 now, followed by an extra $5,000 once all the rooms are leased." While the owner appreciates his ingenuity, he's averse to the risk. Bernard communicates that he understands. Just before he departs, he observes the owner's desk calendar, which bears the imprint of a local bank manager. An idea materializes in his thoughts. He bids farewell to the owner and immediately proceeds to the bank, locating the manager who sent the calendar. The manager's secretary, showing clear racial bias, declines to introduce him. After an extended wait at the bank entrance, he intercepts the manager as he exits, articulating, "I am acquainted with one of your prominent clients. My enterprise will be advantageous to them, and I hope you will approve my request for a loan." However, the manager denies his appeal without a moment's consideration. That night, he receives a phone call from the owner. The owner inquires, "Did you exploit my name to try and procure a loan?" With no recourse, he apologizes. Unexpectedly, the owner does not fault him. Rather, he admires his tenacity and dedication towards attaining his goals. He decides to endorse the loan for him, enabling Bernard to secure his first bank loan and to make a deal on the property. "You workmen should be more prudent," an elderly woman said with disapproval. Bernard responds, "Don't be concerned. This is my property, and I'll maintain it responsibly." Rendered speechless, the old woman angrily leaves, prompting the arrival of the authorities soon thereafter. They notify Bernard that the old lady had contacted the police, inquiring as to whether he was posing as the proprietor, contradicting her claims. Unexpectedly, Bernard produces a copy of the land title, having anticipated this issue. Understanding that he is the true owner, the officers depart, frustrated. Later that evening, the old woman instructs Bernard to leave, and that it is not a suitable time for repairs. Bernard replies calmly, "I'm not a worker, I own this building." Puzzled, she leaves days later, declining to reside alongside black people. With the departure of the old woman, Bernard rents to a black lady. As he anticipated, there is an enormous demand in the black tenant sector. The building rapidly becomes occupied, and Bernard makes the remainder of payment to the former owner. Greatly impressed, the previous owner suggests a business partnership. Bernard's expertise would be identifying and evaluating properties, while the original owner would negotiate and finalize deals. They would pretend to be white when dealing with clients, and would split the profits. Bernard embraces this proposal wholeheartedly. The collaboration thrives, yielding substantial financial gains. Bernard transitions his family from their impoverished accommodations to a mansion, offering them a life of contentment. This is his way. When faced with prejudice, he refuses to retaliate. He aims to play according to his own rules, focusing on rational economic principles and maximizing profits. However, life is not without its difficulties, and obstacles can present themselves at any given moment. The former proprietor, aging and fragile, unexpectedly dies after several years. His share of the business goes to his wife, a woman of extreme racial bias, who refuses to partner with Bernard. She makes a condescending offer to acquire his share for a pittance. Should he reject it, she will seek litigation. In a period where white individuals and black people take legal action against each other, who will the judge favor? Bernard declines to accept such unfair treatment and seeks justice in the court system, but he must find a witness to back up his partnership with the old owner. He seeks out the bank manager who is already in contact with the widow and refuses to see him. Frustrated, Bernard looks around the bank, the structured bank structure revealing systematic discriminatory behavior. He is scorned for his skin color when entering the bank, and this sparks an audacious thought. He believes that there are 4 banks in this building, all closed to him as a black man. That is when an idea hits him. He'll purchase this building and force them to acknowledge him. Bernard approaches Joe, another black real estate mogul, and shares his scheme. Joe initially sees it as foolishness. The price tag is enormous, and no person of color has ever bought anything in downtown Hoult. Following a detailed conversation, he decides that Bernard is not a delusional man, but an educated and rational thinker. Bernard wants to buy the building so the banks will then be required to acknowledge him and reveal market trends, improving his business. Joe is taken by the concept and decides to invest. Joe, although well off, is still victim to bias. He's driven to see white bankers on white property, which would generate greater gains. They can't complete transactions with whites directly, so they will need a white intermediary. Bernard has an idea. Matt, who has been assisting him with renovations. Matt is a good-natured and eager man but lacks experience. Bernard and Joe begin to coach Matt intensely, teaching him golf, sophisticated etiquette, finance, and real estate. Matt becomes a quick study in golf and quickly begins to assess property values.
Straight down the middle, we have created a monster.
We made the algebra easy.
He's ready. Yep, he's ready.
Matt meets with the bank building's owner at the golf club, which was arranged by Joe. Matt gets a chance to buy the building, and they would decide the details later. Bernard coaches Matt for the negotiation. Before the conversation, he counts the number of lights at night, calculates the building vacancy, and determines value by using the annual revenues and operation costs. He makes Matt memorize the information, so whatever the owner says, Matt will be able to dispute him with data. Matt is always one step ahead, shocking the owner and his accountant. They suppose he's a math prodigy and cannot be duped. At the end, Bernard buys the building for $1.56 million, whereas it was initially valued at $2.4 million. From that point forward, Bernard steps in and out of the building, greeted by the presidents of all the banks. The previous manager who caused him difficulties is in disbelief. With backing from the banking industry, Bernard and Joe's real estate business soars. They dissolve strict segregation between people of color and white individuals in Los Angeles. Soon after, they are invited to see the vice president. In 1963, Bernard and family go visit his father in Texas. After dinner, his father expresses his pride. The next day, Bernard and his son stroll around town, and they stumble upon the bank where he once shined shoes. He realizes that it was the most racist place in the country at the time. He meets a young boy only working on white people's shoes.
How much for a shine?
Only do white folks here, sir.
Bernard is moved by the injustice and is reminded of his duty to his fellow man. He decides to change the status quo and help blacks in his home with housing. The next day, Bernard proposes buying the main bank in Texas. Joe thinks he is crazy, given how racist the state is, but Bernard explains his reasoning. Joe agrees to assist in this purchase. They use Matt once more as a face, While they meet with Robert Florence Sr. and Jr. despite the suspicion of Robert Jr., Robert Sr. agrees to the deal. With the acquisition of the main bank, Bernard goes to work, helping black people with getting loan approvals. It was as if Bernard's goal was to help his people secure housing and make a living. Things are good for some time, until Florence Jr. begins to investigate. One day Florence Jr. follows Matt and comes across Bernard and Joe. He confronts them about the loan approvals and claims the Treasury Department will be auditing them in a month. The team discusses and Matt suggests buying another bank and moving the bad loans over to it. They discuss buying the bank of Marlon Moore, but Bernard expresses concerns over oversight. Matt suggests that he will take the reins of the new bank. Bernard is unsure, but lets Eunice oversee Matt. Eventually, Matt gets to run the new bank. The next day, Matt meets with a lawyer and starts executing contracts. On cue, Matt is called by Florence Jr., who claims that clients want to pull their funds from mainland. Furthermore, a federal banking auditor arrives at Marlon to assist Matt. Bernard dresses as a janitor in order to be near the meeting. However, the examiner sees a big problem with some of the loans. Bernard is dumbfounded that the unreasonable loans were approved. It turns out Florence Jr. was behind it, and Matt, while in a rush to get up and running, hired a lawyer that Florence recommended. He was then able to sneak in the problematic loans. Bernard and Joe tell Matt that they should walk away from Marlon, but he refuses. Matt makes a move without his partners, and the next day Joe finds out. He rushes to Mainland Bank with Bernard. They question Matt about the loans, while Florence watches with pleasure. Bernard asks for the books, but it's too late. The feds are going to revoke their banking license. When they are leaving the building, Bernard and Joe are arrested by the FBI. Bernard tries to defend himself, but it's pointless. After some time, they meet with their lawyer. Their case was affected by the country's political issues.
But niggas like these can own banks and loan money to other niggas.
Matt speaks with Senator Mullen about testifying against his partners in exchange for his freedom. That night, Matt calls and decides what to do. Matt follows Mullen's instructions and testifies against his partners at the Senate hearing. Bernard meets with Mullen and listens to the offer. He can accept immunity and confirm Matt's testimony, or he can say what he wants and go to jail. In the end, Bernard decides to voice what he has held in his heart for so long. He speaks on racial discrimination in America.
The dress code.
Mr. Garrett, you are out of order, sir.
I'm not finished.
Remove the witness.
Why is it so important to you to exclude an entire race of people?
Soon after, Bernard and Joe lose their money and are sent to prison. Florence Jr. purchases the Mainland Bank for pennies on the dollar, and Matt Steiner is never charged with anything. Several years go by, Bernard and Joe get released from prison, and Eunice is confused that they are happy after losing everything. They reveal they own property next to each other in the Bahamas. She questions this, and Bernard states that the man Matt called the night before his testimony was actually Bernard. Matt told him of Mullen's offer and apologized. Bernard requested a favor. They moved all their assets before the government seized them. The movie ends with Bernard and Joe's property being a part of the fight to end housing discrimination in LA, and that they still own their 2 mansions in the Bahamas.